Question number 10, Clare Curran.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Māori Development. Why did he tell Radio New Zealand yesterday he did not discuss programming content with Paora Maxwell on the 20th of May, when Paora Maxwell said in an email to staff on the 22nd of May that, quote, "we talked about content"?
The Honourable Te Urara Flavel.
Tēnā koe, Mr Speaker. Kia ora tātai. Mr Speaker, the full question I was asked by Radio New Zealand was, quote, "did you discuss the program that they were planning to run on whānau ora?" And in response I said I had no discussions whatsoever about any program content of any program. I stand by that statement.
Thank you. Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Clare Curran.
In the light of that answer, has he encouraged a culture under his ministership where news and current affairs staff of Māori television are not protected if they scrutinise or criticise performance of Māori organisations or individuals? And is this not editorial interference?
The Honourable Te Urara Flavel.
If anything, Mr Speaker, I hope I encourage staff and indeed the country to continue to focus on the kaupapa of Māori television. Te reo, me ona tikanga.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Clare Curran.
Can he rule out any connection between Māori television management saying a panel discussion on whānau ora would, quote, not appeal to viewers, and his press secretary saying that a panel discussion on whānau ora would not, quote, enlighten viewers? Or is this just a coincidence?
Mr Speaker.
The Honourable Te Urara Flavel.
Well, I can tell the member is that yesterday the head of current affairs and news of Māori television said that the claim of political interference in Māori television is inaccurate, and in fact said, for the record, to help the member, for the record, the 20th of May meeting was set up on the 19th of February. Any suggestion that there was a link between the replacement of the panel with a best of show and the meetings did not reflect reality. That's the statement from Māori television.
Supplementary question, Madam Fox.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Given the obvious leaks of emails making their way to the Labour Party benches...
Order. That question will be ruled out of order. I'll give the opportunity, just to ask a supplementary question that's in line with standing orders. Without that sort of information, otherwise the member will lose her opportunity.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Given the light of new information coming out from the crossbenches, does the Minister have concerns about the level...
Order. If the member just starts where I interrupted her, I'll allow the question. If she goes back where she was, it won't be allowed.
Thank you for the clarification, Mr Speaker. Does the Minister have concerns about the level of crossbench political interference in the managemental processes of Māori television?
Honourable Te Urara Flavel.
Mr Speaker.
Order. Chris Hipkins, point of order.
Point of order, Mr Speaker. I just want to be clear. Are you accepting now that the Minister is responsible for any actions taken by opposition members of Parliament?
Order. Yeah, I'll hear from the Honourable Jerry Browning.
Well, Mr Speaker, the question was extremely clear in asking if the Minister had concerns.
Order. There was an issue yesterday where I had to remind this side that points of order will be here in silence. I've got to do the same on this occasion to my left-hand side. Would the Minister please
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I've got to say the opposition would be a lot better with the Minister supervising.
Order, just complete your point of order.
The question was very clear. It asked the Minister if he had concerns about interference in the activities of Māori television and then referred to possibly coming from the crossbenches of the Parliament. That's not unreasonable.
Order.
He's already accepted questions. He's already accepted questions from the crossbenches about the issue of interference with the activities of Māori television.
Order. I was very generous to the member in allowing the question. In my mind, the essence of the question is the Minister can have the opportunity to ensure the House if there's political interference from anybody in this House. That's the way I read the question, and on that basis I'm allowing the question and the Minister to answer it.
Bearing in mind that the...
Order will now have the answer.
Mr Speaker, bearing in mind that these are some of the accusations that are angled at me, I'd be very concerned if there was any political interference by any Member of Parliament, and I hold that as a very high standard to ensure that it doesn't happen. Thank you.
Question.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Clare Curran.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. At an event on May 21st last year, did he tell Māori television staff that if they had concerns with Mr Maxwell, not to go signing petitions, not to go to media, to come to him, and if he thinks it should be dealt with, he will deal with it?
Honourable Te Urara Flavel.
That's very good, Mr Speaker, because in the context of a pōheri that was held for the new CEO, it was said in front of the CEO of Māori television. Why? Because he comes from an honourable waka called Te Arawa. It's important we look after them.
Supplementary.
Order. Supplementary question, Clare Curran.
Did he in this speech express anger and disappointment that Paula Maxwell had faced criticism leading to his appointment as CEO?
Speaker.
The Honourable Te Urara Flavel.
I think that's clear, Mr Speaker, because that member had carried out a character assassination of a particular member of the waka, and that's sad under the conditions at the time, but in the end it's okay because the current CEO went through a rigorous process to become the CEO of Māori television, and the great thing is, sir, they're moving from better to great.
True. Supplementary.
Order. Supplementary question, Clare Curran.
What concerns has he raised over the management of Māori television, given that several top journalists have left, due in part to claims of managerial interference in news?
Honourable Te Urara Flavel.
As I said in previous discussions, issues with respect to the operations of Māori television were not discussed in that context, and I have made no statement with respect to that, and I wouldn't. I shouldn't, I would not and shouldn't, and if members are going to take me back to the time that there was a pōheri for the CEO, in front of the CEO, in front of these staff, I think it's drawing long straws.
Question number 11, Jackie Dean.